what we're going to do today is take a look at a couple of clips that seem to garnish a little bit of question out of the audience, and I figured it would be a good chance to take a look at them, see what sort of my take is on what the situation that's going on out there and this sort of these heavy weather situations, and just shed a little bit of light on actually what was going on and my thinking as far as why I was doing what I was doing. So first clip is going to be the really rolly one, where I'm essentially getting tossed around like a rag doll out at sea. So here we go. So I'm obviously in a pretty ugly little situation here, but essentially what's happened is I'm in a pretty ugly low pressure system, and sometimes in those situations you also get squalls that come on top of the rather heavy wind. And the wind speeds there were about 30 knots or so, but when a squall comes through, although it builds things up for a little bit, when it pushes back and passes you, then you're left with this little bubble of sort of high pressure where the squall winds are fighting the normal winds. And even though the sea is chopped up and it's coming from a few different directions, I don't have much wind in my sails. And essentially I know that eventually that wind is going to fill back in. Literally within just minutes, it came back, and all of a sudden we had much more pressure on the sails, and we were able to keep sort of a more steady run, because I was trying to get as far south as I could, as fast as I could, to avoid the rest of this weather system. So a lot of people were saying that I should put up more sail or change course, this and that. Changing course wouldn't really do much because the waves were coming from all sorts of different directions. The other thing was that I remain in the cockpit because it's much safer. If I can wait 5-10 minutes, the wind fills back in, then I'm good to go. If I were to go up on deck and put up a staysail or a jib, and that is really dangerous because you might get thrown off. Even if you're clipped in, it can be dangerous. It's one of those things where it's much better just to wait, because I also knew that in a matter of minutes the wind was going to pipe back up to about 30 knots, so I would have had to take that jib down. So in this clip, really the essential thing is just to wait, be patient, and then let the winds fill in. Very common occurrence out there out at sea. All right, so this next clip is basically after it's first light after the night where we had the knockdown, and essentially I'm just sort of assessing the damage for the first time.
All right, damage report. It's finally light out, thank goodness. And yeah, I mean, these seas, they're kind of big, but they're not knock your boat straight over big. Woo-hoo! We're still trying to just get on out of here. The sooner we can get south, the sooner this wind will quit and the waves will die off a bit. So that's the plan. But yeah, basically had this, and then there's an arch, solar panels, and the gallows for the boom ripped completely out, ripped apart the cap rail. I can only assume that essentially what happened was when the boat went over and then got pushed into the water, because I think we went over like 90 degrees, then another almost 90. I think we went almost upside down, but not quite. Dodger is toast, obviously.
Still pretty rattled. I had been awake for about 24 hours in a pretty stressful situation. So, mentally you're sort of pretty exhausted and just trying to sort of deal with things. And the waves definitely are still pretty big, but they actually would grow in size over the next few hours to a point where I thought, like, whoa, this could really get pretty bad if we got hit. we're in the wrong place right at the wrong time. So I'm just running with this, trying to go with the waves and with the wind, and essentially just try and sort of keep calm in this situation. It was pretty shocking to see the shape that Sparrow's in and all the damage that had occurred just 4 or 5 hours before. And like I said, pretty exhausted, but you're just trying to keep your composure, and you know that the winds are forecast to ease off a little bit, and so you're just trying to make it to that point and do all you can to get away from the dangers that I was in. And that really came into play with the Gulf Stream, because I knew the further south I got, further away from the stream I got, which would calm the waves down mostly. That was the biggest concern for me at that time, and so that's what I was essentially trying to do. But really in this clip, it's sort of like, holy cow, wow, okay, let's just make it through this, and then we'll go from here and then figure out the new game plan. All right, this next one is just running with the wind, and I always get a lot of comments about using just the mainsail and instead of using a jib when I'm running straight with the wind and with the waves. And let's just take a look real quick. All right, so we're caught up in this pretty ugly little squall. I know it's just a squall, it's not a big weather system, and so I have just doused the staysail and I'm running just on a triple reefed mainsail. And Sparrow is a full-length keel, so it does really well with just that tiny bit of mainsail. I mean, it's really tiny, so the possibility of rounding up into the wind really isn't there. I've had a lot of practice doing this. Part of the reason that I like to do this is that it allows me to easily change the sail plan without risking sort of my life to do so. And by that I mean, if the wind were to pipe up, I could go ahead and raise up the storm jib, which is ready to go up forward, and then, which is very easy, and I can do that pretty much from the cockpit, and then I can go right to the mast and take down the mainsail easily. The reverse of that is that if the waves build up and the winds start to die off and you need more sail, essentially it's much harder to go ahead and raise the mainsail if you're just running off the storm jib. And so it's sort of, for me, it's a pro and con. The boat would probably track a little bit better if it was just the headsail, but I would also have to use a pole to make sure that it was flat and perpendicular to the wind, which adds another dimension. Which also makes it a little more dangerous. You have to work up on the foredeck, which again, if you can avoid doing that in sort of these heavy weather situations, it's much safer. You're less apt to get knocked overboard or anything like that. And so it's really just a safety concern, but it really only works with this boat because it's a full-length keel, because the mainsail is so small and the mast is pretty far forward. Other boats, this might not work, so you definitely have to know your boat. Other than that, hopefully this shed a little bit of light on some of these clips and what I do out there. And yeah, I'm still around to talk about it, so I guess proof's in the pudding. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe, and until next time.